I'm lucky enough to be here to witness it, to be part of it. Larry has on Ann Coulter, and she just so happens to be on the phone right now. Welcome to the show, Ann.
Thank you. Good to be here, Derek Hunter.
I'm glad to talk to you as always. Your latest column is It's an Invasion of Moronic Arguments. And I don't know if you didn't get the memo. Maybe you haven't been checking your email. But the word invasion, the word infestation in any context, when uttered by anybody on the right, no matter how true it is and how accurately they're using that word, is racist. So explain yourself, please.
Yes, explain yourself, Anne. Well, I think we owe the Beatles and the Rolling Stones reparations for many years of talking about the British invasion. There was the Amazon invasion in Brooklyn. I mean, all these perfectly legitimate words in a million different contexts. Ooh, if it applies to one of the blacks or browns, that automatically just makes it racist. Well, plus which anything Trump says, anything a Trump supporter says. What I really objected to was this idea that because a crazy person commits a violent act, that anything he believes, anything he says to justify that, well, that's, ipso facto hateful. And anyone who also says that must be a hateful person giving material support to terrorists. That is completely the argument that has been made for about a week now on MSNBC, which is worse than the deplorable thing. I mean, not only did Trump complain about illegal immigration, but his voters were obviously quite moved by his promise to build a wall and deport illegals. To describe that as, inspiring terrorism, inspired the mass shooting, particularly, I mean, you do sometimes think that a vengeful God is on Donald Trump's side. The very same day, we have an Elizabeth Warren supporter, an Antifa supporter, an ICE hater, committing a mass shooting up in Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah, but if you notice, Dayton has gone the way of the dodo. Chris Cuomo and Anderson Cooper were dispatched to El Paso, and you got two of them. You think you could send them to one to each. They didn't dispatch their primetime anchors to Dayton. Once they found out that it was one of theirs, they kind of have started to memory hole Dayton as if it didn't happen. It's not shocking at all. They did the same thing with James Hodgkinson. The media had moved on in 3 days. Steve Scalise was still on life support, and CNN stopped talking about it.
And, well, I went through this sort of argument has never been used before, probably because violence usually does come from left-wing extremists. I mean, historically it has. Left-wing extremists, Muslim extremists. Nobody said after Major Nidal Hassan shot up Fort Hood that, since he was upset, his primary motivating cause was he was really upset about the invasion of Iraq. So did Obama say, did right-wingers say, well, now you can't pull troops out because, the terrorists agreed with you? I mean, we might have disagreed with the policy, but our argument was not a terrorist agreed with you. Therefore, the policy is evil. Therefore, anyone who supports the policy is evil. It's a crazy argument. It's never been made before. Same thing with James Hodgkinson. And in fact, I quoted much of his Facebook page because talk about material support for terrorists. His favorite TV shows, Rachel Maddow, Bill Maher, Democracy Now! They're all still on air. They all still hate Trump, as James Hodgkinson did. And in fact, the things he said, dump Trump, Trump's a traitor, Trump and his supporters must be stopped. This seems to be sort of the theme of every Democrat running for president. So do they need to be on a terrorist watch list? Let's just argue policies on their own merit. Finally, incidentally, the El Paso shooter, as I'm sure your listeners know, he had a lot of stuff that could not possibly.
He was an environmentalist nut. So he was worried about the planet and environmental overcrowding and overpopulation. But, Ann, this is something that kind of drives me nuts because I see conservatives all the time making a lot of the points that you make. Sean Hannity made it this week about Dayton. We shouldn't be saying this. So an Elizabeth Warren supporter, Bernie bro, we shouldn't be doing that. It's cheap, so Democrats shouldn't be doing it. We've been saying that for years, and it hasn't stopped them at all. Democrats are undeterred by reality. isn't it time that we fight back? Shouldn't we be saying Dayton was inspired by progressive politics?
Oh, yeah.
And hold them to their own make them take their own medicine? It's their fault that it's a spiky suppository. They got to take it. They made it.
100% agree. Could not agree more. In fact, I've argued with some of my friends an analogous point is the way certain talk radio hosts would always make fun of Obama for misspeaking, like the 57 states line.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of my friends would say, oh, come on, everybody misspeaks. And I said, yeah, I know. I don't care. It's because only when conservatives misspeak is that taken as proof positive of a low IQ. He must be a moron. So we have to point it out when they do it. Not even necessarily to say, obviously Obama was not a moron. But yeah, of course he misspeaks. Everybody misspeaks. It's only right-wingers, when they have a slip of the tongue. Oh, Sarah Palin, she's a moron. There was that whole book by, what's his name, Jake Weisenberg, I think. It was like Bushisms that you'd get at the Barnes and Noble checkout line. It's an industry for them, as if it's an amazing point. Someone who speaks a lot sometimes stumbles over his words. Amazing.
Well, speaking of gaffes and taking advantage of them, we got sniffy Uncle Plugs over there on the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, yesterday saying two things that were, I want to play cut 10 here. This is Joe Biden on the soapbox at the Iowa State Fair.
Division. We choose science over fiction. We choose truth over facts. And so, folks, if you're interested, join me. I could use the help.
I could use the help. Sounds like a cry for. We choose truth over facts. And now this is the party that has every individual has their own truth. Of course, there's just one universal truth, but they believe everybody has their own truth. So maybe that's what they're talking about. But that's kind of Andrea Mitchell spent a 5-minute segment on the Today Show giving proper context to Joe Biden's poor kids are just as bright as white kids comments today. You ever see a Republican get that kind of treatment?
Oh my gosh, the white kids, poor kids one was pretty amazing. I don't think people should be jumped all over for these things. Sorry if I'm sounding like a wimp to you, Derek.
You are.
Wow, if that had been said by any Republican, that sort of slip of the tongue, it would be career suicide. It would be over. Though I really like the quote, "We prefer truth over facts."
But what I think we're seeing here with Joe Biden is a man in the decline. Just like we saw with Robert Mueller, who didn't seem to know what he was doing. He wasn't familiar with the report with his name on it, needed things repeated back to him. Joe Biden, that hearing was kind of like elder abuse with Democrats going at him. Joe Biden is kind of on the decline in that sense. When he said we prefer truth over facts, he didn't catch it. Normally, if everybody misspeaks, you catch it and you almost immediately correct yourself, or sometimes you make a self-deprecating joke about what you just said and how you screwed it up. He kind of caught poor kids are just as bright as white kids, because after a couple of seconds he said, wealthy kids, black kids, Hispanic kids. He just then started listing off ethnicities with throwing the word kid at the end of it. But are we watching a guy kind of suffering the early stages of a breakdown?
Well, I'll probably be arguing that if they pick him as their nominee. But yeah, he's not in fighting form. Even Biden with the beginning signs of dementia, is saner than Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. One of my fans on Twitter said, "Why does Coulter keep saying Biden is the most moderate of them, that he'd be the best choice to beat Trump?" And I tweeted back to him, look at the alternatives. I'm not saying this guy is, Mr. Perfection here, but look at the alternatives with all of these Democrats calling Trump a white supremacist. And let's just, put a pin in white supremacist for a moment. This is such a BS-y, Students for a Democratic Society, Spartacus League line. They must be laughing their butts off that they have injected this into national discourse. Nobody ever heard this before outside of a college Spartacus League class. It's like running dog lackeys of the capitalist system. What on earth are they even talking about?
Well, I love that it used to, racist covers it. If that's the point you're trying to convey, just saying that this person is a racist would normally cover it by its very definition, but they have so drilled that word into the ground that it has no meaning. So they also have this perverted view of the world that only white people can be racist. So they decided, since the word is played out, everybody just ignores it when they hear it. Now they've got to come up with something else, and white supremacist and white nationalists are now their new go-to words.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's like the reverse of what they usually do, which is the euphemisms for the stuff they believe. They used to be progressives, and then people figured out that meant communists. So they became liberals, and then people figured out that meant communists. So now they're back to progressives. I think there was another one in there. And abortion. We've gone from abortion, pro-choice, pro-woman.
Reproductive freedom.
Reproductive freedom, yes.
They're just liberating the child from the womb preemptively with a machine that chops it up.
Yes, be suspicious of people who are constantly having to change words like this.
I've got to get your take on this, Ann, as I think I read somewhere that you'd written something about immigration, and if this is out of your comfort zone, feel free to tell me. But the ICE raids that happened the other day, where they got 680 people or whatever it was at one employer down in Mississippi, and then the media immediately manages to find the children. They just happen to be outside the police station. And the crying videos of the children and all the horrors of ripping families apart. I know you spent a lot of time in California. That's where Kamala Harris is, and she's particularly upset about this. Does California have family prisons so that children are not separated from their parents?
No, you're right. These are lawbreakers. Frankly, the way the Trump administration is moving, the father will probably be separated from the family for about, 29 minutes.
300 of them have already been released for humanitarian reasons.
PR stunts, but they'll stay here forever. Yeah, it really sucks when, your parents break the law. It really sucks when they hire coyotes to help them break the law. But you're right, in no other circumstance do we say, well, we can't put this burglar in prison. We can't arrest a burglar because he has kids. Is that what the new rule is going to be? That we can't enforce any laws against people with kids? That's great news for you, Derek.
Hey, I've got 2 kids. I could go for a couple of 2-week stints every now and then in the joint.
I wasn't suggesting that you'd enjoy it as you are. I'm just suggesting you stop paying your taxes and say, you can't do anything to me. You'd be separating me from my children. And I also want to say, I know we're running out of time here, but I don't think Americans should feel guilty about having hard hearts toward these maudlin displays from the media of only certain victims. We only have to see certain victims crying. I'm sorry, I'm saving my reserves of sympathy for American victims. How about American victims of illegal aliens? No, we never, ever, ever see them. Why aren't any of the angel moms ever being interviewed? Why aren't their other children, their surviving children being interviewed? Americans are very generous people, but this con game is really starting to, it's like having to listen to gypsies all the time. At some point, you get sick of the con game.
The difference is you can separate. Look, I can feel bad for the kids. The kid's obviously upset. Their parent is being held in custody, and the kids want to be around their parents. But you can also say, but then it's the parents' fault. It's not as though it's like the movie Old School, where Will Ferrell and the gang are riding around in a bus grabbing senior citizens off street corners. They found them for a very specific reason, and the reason is they broke the law.
Yes. But I guess I'm going a little more hardcore. I get tired of hearing from the same victims. I do look on it very coldly. The same way those of you who have traveled abroad have seen, particularly in Europe, you see the gypsies with their begging babies.
You go by the Eiffel Tower.
Will actually, cut off a limb of a child so they'll get more money begging on the street. I'm sorry about it in the abstract, but I'm not falling for it. That's a separate point. Not falling for it anymore. It encourages more such behavior.
And Coulter, you can always be counted on for cold logic. Thank you for taking the time today. You're at the airport, it sure sounds like, so have a good flight.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I just hope everybody leaves you alone out there the way as crazy as it is right now. You don't run into any Joaquin Castro fans.
Oh, airports are great for me. They're like Ann Coulter book signings.
There you go. Go hang out at the Hudson's, and we'll talk to you again soon, Ann.
Talk to you soon, Derek. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ann Coulter, everybody.